Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Hot on the heels of my admittedly belated NG July announcements video, we have the Gemini Jets July announcement video, and this one's much more timely because the models were announced only a couple of days ago. And you can breathe on these videos because there's a lot less models. Gemini have got only 9 releases for us this month, or 11 if you count the flaps down versions as separate releases, which I don't for the purposes of this sort of video. And Gemini has been getting quite a bit of praise recently. It's been getting praise for the releases, for the diversity of its releases, and it's been getting praise for producing new molds for 737-600 and the 767-400. And I tend to agree with some of that. I think that their releases have been pretty good this year, and it is nice to see some new mold production. It's always nice to see that. However, on the flip side of that, let's not get carried away. The release sets aren't that diverse, and this month, if you look at the airlines, it's not at all diverse. And so you can't, on the one hand, give NG a lot of hassle for not releasing diversity, and then on the other hand praise Gemini for being diverse when Gemini's release sets are categorically a lot less diverse than what NG is producing. NG may not be making what you like, but Gemini is still making the same stuff it always has, really. Having said that, as I say, there have been some good models and some interesting releases here and there. Similarly, when it comes to new molds, as we will discuss, it's great that there are new molds. It's not so great that they're not so great. So again, if you're doing a direct comparison with NG, which is nowadays their biggest competitor, you've got to say the molds aren't as good. So anyway, it is actually quite a nice set of models this month again. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm bagging Gemini. I think that they've had a good year and there have been some good models, and almost every month there's 1 or 2 models here now which I'm actually interested in getting. So even though the diversity of the airlines isn't that high, they are hitting a lot of the marks that myself and other collectors want, and so that continues this month, and it is quite a nice batch, which we will discuss momentarily. Obviously, first off, I've got to tell you to subscribe to the channel and check me out at yesterday's airline, in fact at yesterday airlines, sorry, on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, it is the website which is where the majority of content spawns from and disseminates through the internet. So check out yesterdaysairlines.com for the material there. There's always good stuff being made and new material covering molds, releases, details, aviation history, liveries, all that kind of stuff, which makes the collecting more exciting, I think. Cool, but let's get on and check out these Gemini sets. Okay, so we're going to start off with the Airbuses into the Boeings. As always, I like to do it that way, and there's only a single Airbus product this month from Gemini. It is a Delta Airlines A330-900neo. It is registered N407DX. And I've been on record as really liking the JC Gemini A330-900 mold. I've got a couple, and I've done a detailed comparison of it with the Phoenix version, and it easily trumps that. So the mold is looking great. If we look at releases for Delta A330-900s, then this will be the 3rd, but it is only the 2nd in the standard scheme. The previous version was made quite some time ago now, in 2019. So a 4-year gap period. It's not surprising it's being remade, and I would suspect that there is significant demand for another A330-900 in the current livery. So even though it is a re-release, it is one I think which is well deserved and will sell well, and I'm sure will be welcomed by a lot of people. Obviously Delta's extremely popular, especially modern Delta releases, with a large swathe of collectors in the States. So all of this is adding up to actually better than a workhorse. Usually I'd workhorse something which is a re-release, but in this case I don't think it warrants workhorse. I think that the combination of the mold, delivery and demand for it is going to push this one up into high flyer territory. So good start there for Gemini. Model number 2 is a classic release, and there has been a bit more classic material this year from Gemini, which has been one of the nice aspects of the sets. This one is a Transworld Airlines 747 SP. It's N58201. It's got the little Boston Express sticker, and you have to say that usually this kind of release would get a big thumbs up from myself, but not in this particular case. There's an aspect of the releases this month which must be slightly galling to Gemini, and that is that ngmodels has got there first for several of them, and this one is one in particular. Now the reason I imagine it's galling is because I would suspect that these Gemini models have been sitting around in their warehouse for some time, and they've basically been gazumped by NG, who's got their product to market faster, even though the Gemini products have already been made. So that must be a little bit annoying. But in this case, with the TWA SP, the difference between the models is going to be chalk and cheese. I actually sold my original Gemini 747 SP in this exact scheme, though I didn't have the Boston Express tiles, to replace it with the NG, and that original version dated all the way back from near the start of the collecting, 2002 it was released. Fundamentally, it is exactly the same mould they're going to be using for this new release. It's just that they've added aerials and upgraded the landing gear. I'm sure the printing will be much better too, and for example they might get the anti-glare correct size this time, but it is still fundamentally a mould dating from the very start of 400 scale. It's a mould which I'm okay to buy if there's no competition, as with the recent Air Mauritius, which may well get a review at the website, so keep an eye out for that. But it is not a mould which is at all competitive with the NG if there is a competing NG product. The NG release on this was exemplary, a really, really attractive release, and I've got on record for saying that I wish NG would use their SP mould a lot more. But certainly it's going to slam dunk this new Gemini version, no problem. So I don't really understand why anybody would be excited by this Gemini release unless they literally didn't know NG models existed, in which case you're just not paying attention enough. So this is a bit of a pointless release. It's a sort of release which I could put in Gas Guzzler, but I feel that that is perhaps a little harsh, considering it's still a mould that I'm willing to buy. As I just said, I got the Air Mauritius version of this. It's just nowhere near as good as the NG version in terms of pretty much every aspect of it, really. I'm not going to go into detail. If you're interested in that, check out the detailed comparison scoring at yesterday's Airlines for the 747 SP. So I'm going to put this one into Workhorse. I don't really understand why it's been made, other than they probably made it ages ago and hadn't got around to releasing it, and then NG in between have beaten them to the chase. So, yeah, Workhorse for this one, I think. The next model is another 747, but this one is a 747-400 freighter. It is on the lovely interactive mould. It's in the colours of Air China Cargo. B2476 is the registration. I really like the interactives. I've said this many times now. I know that there are people that don't, but you're only going to buy these if you're going to display them with the cargo doors open. So they look great with the cargo doors open. I really like them. And they have worked on decreasing the gaps when they're closed. This is a model I will be looking to acquire. There has only been 2 Air China Cargo 747 freighters previously, a quite nice Aero Classics version from a long, long time ago, and an abomination of a Phoenix version from much more recently. This one is going to be much better than that. regardless of whether you've got the doors open or closed. This is a really good mould, and as long as the QC is okay, it will be a great addition to your collection. So for me, this one is supersonic. I know Air China doesn't excite a lot of people outside, or a lot of people in America, which is Gemini's primary market, but obviously Air China, China Southern Airlines, they do make, and in this case, I think this is going to be a very, very good model. So supersonic for that one. And next up, we've got the model which I guess for many is probably their model of the month, because this is this month's 767-400. It's a Delta Airlines version. It's wearing the current scheme. It's got a little logo or a little signature at the front. Vince Dooley, I'm not sure who that is, and I can't be bothered to check up, probably some sports person. But regardless, it is effectively a new scheme, 767-400. In colours of Delta, and a lot of people want this. And looking through the releases, there has not been a release for the current colours on a 767-400. There has been the breast cancer awareness pink version made by Herpa, but no standard colours version. So this is going to be in massive, massive demand. Unfortunately, there is plenty of criticism to be attached to this new Gemini 767-400 mould. I just recently did a detailed comparison of it with the Dragonwings mould, which is a clear 23 years older, and the Dragonwings mould won. It's a little embarrassing. So check that out, see if you agree or not. I mean, it probably won't impact you buying it. If you want the scheme, you're going to buy it anyway. And at distance, the Gemini version looks okay, but fundamentally, it's got multiple areas of the mould which are weak. It's got a very short front gear, much too short. It's got an odd anhedral to the wings. It's got an incorrectly sized and shaped tail cone. It's got really bad engines that are basically just taken off their old 767-300 mould. Really generic, lacking details, bad engine pylons. So even though other aspects of the mould are okay and it does look like a 767, in detail it's inferior to the Dragon, which has a better undercarriage length, better engines, better engine pylons, better wing dihedral, and a better tail cone. You know, it just seems like they weren't really trying that hard with this 767-400 mould, and so it makes it difficult to rank these in these videos, because I know the mould isn't great, but I know there's massive demand. I mean, I could almost just workhorse this one because I'm not liking the mould that much, but it's going to sell well. I mean, yeah, workhorse or high flyer, workhorse or high flyer. I'll put it in the high flyer, I think, but with the caveat that if you're buying this, you've got to be aware the mould is not as good as it should be, fundamentally, for a 2023 mould. It really seems like they skimped here by taking components from their old 767 moulds and plugging them in to this new one, the engines and pylons especially, and yeah, just not really up to the standards you'd expect. But I'll still go high flyer, because, hey, I'm a generous fella. Okay, next two models, 5 and 6, again, both models where NG have got there before Gemini have got their release out. Last month we had a BA 777, and this month we've got another BA 777. This one comes in flaps up and flaps down version, so that is good for some, I imagine. The reg is G Yankee Mike Sierra. It's in the current scheme, and it's going to be on the very nice JC mould, which is arguably superior to the NG, but only by a relatively small margin. And if you look at the NG version, which came out recently, it actually looks really good. So again, if you were really after a BA 777, I'd be surprised if you hadn't already gone and got that one. But maybe some people literally just don't check out anyone else but Gemini. I don't know. There have obviously been plenty of previous releases of BA777s, even in this scheme. Phoenix have made it. Gemini have made an older version too on the seamed mould. So there are plenty of older versions of it floating around. But this one will be very nice. Arguably, it could even be the best one that's ever been made, but it has been made quite a lot. I'm going to put this one into Workhorse for that reason. Next up is another bread and butter Gemini airline and aircraft, and that's an American Airlines 7878. The reg is N808 Alpha November. And again, this one comes both in flaps up and down variants. But it again has been made by NG not long ago. I think it was probably late last year. And their version turned out and looked really nice. So again, do you need another one? Don't know, maybe you do, maybe you missed it. It has been made previously by Gemini as well, twice, quite a long time ago now, on the seamed mould they used to have. So those ones, actually it wasn't that long ago, 2020. And those are obviously going to be massively inferior because they're on a very weak mould by comparison. So again, there's nothing unique going on here. It's been made recently by NG. It's been made previously by Gemini. And I'm going to put this one again into Workhorse. Even though, yet again, the JC mould is really good, it's nonetheless a model which I'd be surprised if people didn't have already. But I also suspect that for both of these, BA and the AA, that there's probably demand because there's a big enough market for both those airlines. So they'll probably sell anyway. But Workhorse. Okay, and that leaves us 3 models to discuss, which are not Boeing or Airbus, which is a lovely surprise. Next up, we have an American Eagle -8 Q100, and it's registered N837EX. And what is nice about this is it's wearing this, I always say it wrong, don't I? Piedmont a retro livery. It's Piedmont, not Piedmont. And this looks like it was painted on the aircraft in 2016, so it's not that old, and it looks like the aircraft was retired in 2018, so I only flew with this for a couple of years, but nonetheless, it obviously celebrates the heritage of Piedmont, one of the legacy airlines that nowadays makes up American, and it's a nice scheme. It is lovely to see some -8, short -8s. There have only been now 9 -8-100 releases, including this one, and only, you know, and you're looking at the list, 5 of those are Canadian, so it's massively underrepresented. Outside of those Canadians, there's just been some really random Japanese airline I hadn't really heard of. There's been a Henson Aviation, which is great. That's also in the Piedmont colours, but a classic Piedmont. And there's been a Qantas link. So it's incredible that there have been so few, and it is great to see the mould finally return after a massive period of not being used. So that's great. And that combination of interesting aircraft and scheme and a good mould really elevates this one. I should also say that there have been a couple of what are called -8 Q200s, but only 2 or 3 of them. There really haven't been much in the way of -8s in 400 scale at all. So anyway, getting back to this particular example, it looks great. Should be really nice because the mould is good, as long as the QC isn't bad. Looking at the Qantas release, it really does look like they slightly duffed up the undercarriage. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is dangerous, I know. I'm going to supersonic this one too. And that leaves us with 2 McDonnell Douglas MD-80s. And that is a really nice thing to be saying. The sort of thing you just don't say very often anymore. And it has been very nice to see Gemini using this mould a little bit more regularly than they have, because it is obviously an enormous black hole in the world of 400 scale, the lack of MD-80s. The first aircraft here is Aeromexico. The reg is N103 X. It's in these late 80s orange sheet line bare metal scheme, and it's a lovely scheme. It's a really nice livery. It has been made once before, I should say, though. It's been made previously, well, technically twice, but it's been made previously by JetX. So I'm talking the later version of JetX that was related to jcwings, and in 2011 on a mould which has appeared and disappeared and kind of is not been used much and has definitely vanished now and is very hard to find. And so it's not the old Dragon mould. This is the mould that came in after that. Appeared, disappeared. That mould, I have to say, did have quite an interesting angle. It was very nose down, a bit too much maybe, but it nonetheless looked quite nice. But it's super hard to find any of those old JetX MD-80s from that era. They're really hard to get hold of. So it's not a model I have. It is an airline aircraft combination that would fit my collection very nicely, and one that I'm looking to be getting. And yeah, I'm really hoping that Gemini do a good job on this. They've obviously been using their MD-80 a bit more recently. I got the TWA version and I did review it at the site. The mould is okay. It's not spectacular. It's really good at the back. It gets gradually worse the further forward you go. So unfortunately the nose is a little bit messy. And they don't necessarily print the cockpit windows particularly great either. But it's good enough. And I'm going to put this one up into Supersonic as well. It's a really cool and nice release. The other MD-80 this month is American. It's one of the releases that Gemini had said as a future release, so people knew it was coming. It's USAir, wearing their 80s scheme with the red and burgundy. And yeah, this one's also been made previously. This one's been made by the original JetX using the Dragon Wings mould. It's not a particularly hard model to find. I imagine that most people with a collection of USAir would own this. And it's a nice release. Arguably, the old Dragon MD-80 is at least as good as the current Gemini mould. It's got weaknesses mainly to do with the engines, but it's got a better nose than the current Gemini mould does. So there are trade-offs with either. Neither are perfect, but in this case, I can't see a particularly strong reason to replace the old Dragon version, which looks really good. So I don't think I'm going to. And it would be nice to see Gemini make models that had never been made before. There's plenty of missing MD-80s, so do they really need to go and remake the ones that Dragon did already, or JetX did? So yeah, I'm less excited by this one. I'm going to put this one in the high flyer. It's nice to see MD-80s, it's nice to see a bit of retro, but at the same time, the subject matter isn't quite as good, and there's already a very nice and quite easily findable version of this out there. So I'll high fly that one. And that brings us to the end of this video. It's not a bad month. You've got 3 models in each of the top 3 categories, so that looks pretty good. I would have to say though that you could give Gemini the same criticisms that NG are getting here. They're the same airlines. A lot of these have been re-released. In fact, if you look through this list here, has any of this never been made before? Just the Dash 8 and the 767. Everything else has been made previously by somebody else, sometimes quite recently. So there's not a huge amount of uniqueness or innovation as a certain owner of a brand likes to complain at for certain manufacturers lacking innovation, which I find laughable. But yeah, it still is a solid bunch of models that hit directly, I think, at the customer area that Gemini care about. I think a lot of them will sell very well. The end product for most of these should be excellent. And yeah, it's okay. So there we go. That's my view on this month's Gemini. Pretty good. Not spectacular, but pretty damn good, I have to say. So well done, Gemini. Another solid month for you. That's it for this video from me. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the commentary. I'll see you again for the next set of models, which presumably will be either Phoenix or jcwings in the next week or two. You never know. Okay. Thanks very much. See you next time.